Ready.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So I started my thesis last fall with Dr. Schneider, and I kind of got lost in the weeds as far as doing research, and I put it on ice and did some other things. But now I have to get it done because my topic, it's a project, and I'm going to be designing an online course. And it's a workshop in graphic design history. I teach graphic design at SUNY Oneonta, and they're encouraging us to create online courses. As a matter of fact, our summer courses now, none will be face-to-face. All of them have to be online. So I'm signed up for this summer, and the course is actually already listed, and I have one student signed up for it. So now I have to do it. Which is good. And I've been doing quite a bit of work, and I've got a lot of different parts and pieces that I now have to knit together. So the thesis is going to be a project, and it's more or less delving into instructional design, an online course design or distance learning. And Steve had us sort of pose it as a question. So my question is, how can learning theory inform the design of an online course? And the course is entitled Workshop in Graphic Design History. There's your fire engines. So Steve encouraged me to really focus on the learning theories. So the obvious one is Bloom's taxonomy, because that's what, is accepted as the levels of learning. So this classifies the process of learning into 6 levels that increase in depth and complexity, moving from a lower order of thinking to the higher order of thinking. So I'm going to be really kind of using that as I construct the modules for the online class. And the other one that really appealed to me is sort of the principle of congruence, which is that I have to get these learning objectives to be sort of rock solid, and they'll serve to guide me through each of the phases. And in the end, I have to assess people based on those learning objectives. And I have to say that delving into this theory has changed a little bit the way I teach, or what I put emphasis on in the classroom too. Or I think that I'm able to be much clearer about what I'm going to expect from the students. So there's a little bit less of a sense of confusion as they delve into their projects. And then the other obvious theory that seemed to work, especially I think for design, is constructivism. And this theory explains learning as creating meaning from experience and reflecting upon the experience. So something that every designer does is they're makers. They make something, they sit down and they move things, and they look at it and say, does that look good? And so there's reflection. They'll do a series, they'll do a body of work, and then take a look at where it's taken them or how their style has changed. So it's absolutely constructivism as far as the process. So it states that the learner has to be actively involved in order for the information to move from short-term memory to long-term. Well, as a designer, you have to design, so there's no not being involved. You're definitely doing your learning. So I just kind of broke down, just to review, it's particularly appropriate for a subject like graphic design, as the design process calls for every one of these progressive levels as described in the theory. So knowing, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and of course, creating, right? And the final level of creating is the act that makes someone a designer. It is what the design process leads to. Here I took one module. So it's what it will be, I'm going to hope to get 6 modules done eventually. If I get 4 done for this summer, I think I'll be pretty happy. And I'm thinking for the thesis, and you can let me know if this is cool or not, maybe I would just do 2 as prototypes and then write the thesis part of it. So that's something I'm thinking of, so that by May I have 2 modules completely done. So this first one is the Industrial Revolution in graphic design, and kind of breaking it down by the levels, you know, knowing and remembering. And I'm going to create a video lecture that examines the social, cultural, and technical features of the Industrial Revolution and show a bunch of images of the designs of that time. And then I'm going to contrast it to what came before it, and there'll be a reading assignment. So that's the knowing and remembering. Then level 2, I'm looking for comprehension and understanding, and we'll have a discussion with each student showing an example of a piece of graphic design from the era of the Industrial Revolution, and there'll be a short quiz on the reading assignment and on the video from level 1. Level 3 will be applying, so there'll be an exercise on one aspect of the technique used in this period of design, such as hand lettering. You know, during the Industrial Revolution, one of the skills a designer had to have was hand lettering. And like the last 5 years or so, that's been red hot as a skill. Especially young designers love to learn hand lettering. So we'll delve into something like that, one of the techniques. Level 4 is analyzing. So now I need to come up with an assignment to find a contemporary designer that shows influence of the design of the Industrial Revolution. So they have to understand what the original design style was, so that they can look at contemporary design and say, oh, look at that has that element, and they have to be able to identify it. So level 5 will be synthesizing and evaluating, and each student submits a short statement on how their understanding of the era will be useful in designing a contemporary creative project. So it's a design plan that they're coming up with. And then level 6 is the actual creating, and the assignment is to choose a product or a service and create a finished design that uses characteristics and techniques of the era. And this should be a portfolio piece of good quality that appears to be contemporary design done for a client. You know, there's several levels. I'm hoping that the students who take this class will come out of the class with portfolio pieces that show that they have an understanding of graphic design history. As far as constructivism is appropriate to apply to this online class. I will be asking the learners to experience the period of design history by creating a project that uses theory and techniques of that period. And they are being asked to evolve from knowing factual information about the historic period toward experiencing what it is like to be a designer of that period, and then to reflect upon it. And this course will ask students to place the new knowledge in context with what they've already acquired, so there's some scaffolding. And this course will require a prerequisite, which is the first level course of graphic design. So the students already have some knowledge that they can scaffold the new knowledge upon. So how's this project going to happen? The course will be taught this summer through SUNY Oneonta Art Department, and it's going to be listed on OpenSUNY. I'm going to be using Blackboard course management system. Those students who register this summer will be the first ones to test out this course, so I'll be assessing the course based on them. In the last year, I completed 2 levels of training in order to be certified to teach online classes, and this included ADA compliant design, universal design principles. And it's going to be taught as a trial special topics class this summer, and I hope that it will be adopted then into the regular curriculum. And it was kind of tough I had to do a real sales job on getting them to accept a special topics class to be taught for the first time as a summer class, because they sort of like to do these online summer classes with things that will be sure to attract enough students. But I did manage to get it through, so it's already listed. And as I said, the fully developed course will have 6 modules covering 6 periods of history, and I'm hoping that 2 will demonstrate the course for the thesis. So that's my proposal. That's my hope. I mean, either way, I have to get this course done, and I'm very interested now in instructional design. And I took the course with you, Dr. Khan, some semesters ago. And Vicki, I think I have you beat. I think I've been a student for either 6 years or so. So I've been around for a while. But that's the plan at this time.
Good. Yeah, so this is a wholly online class. There won't be any sort of live or synchronous sessions or.
No,
Okay.
I don't think so at this time. I mean, it's completely online. There's no face-to-face meetings. I might be able to do something like a Zoom session or, a Skype or something like that if I want to meet with a student individually or as a group.
Yeah, you may want to think about that because I find that students often, especially this is an undergraduate course, right?
Correct.
A lot of these students are, the big issue with undergraduate, it's all the way around, but particularly undergraduates is that they stay in the class,
Yes.
And historically it's much more difficult with undergrads. They just don't always have the structure and the motivation that grad students do. And that's fine. I mean, that's something you're going to work on and learn from. I mean, there is the advantage that they can be anywhere, which is a huge plus, and especially in the summer. Is this a credit-bearing class?
Yeah, 3 credits.
So and they would use it for just most degrees in the art department? Is that?
We have a degree, it's right now it's a BS, and it's in digital and studio art.
Okay.
And it's categorized as a computer art class.
Okay.
So far, the students who've been interested are the ones who are graduating in May and still need 3 credits.
Okay.
So somehow they were graduating, but they didn't take as many credits as they should have along the way. So they're sort of grateful, like Ken is smiling here. They're grateful that there's some courses being offered that they can walk the graduation in May and then take a few more credits over the summer. So
now for the final project, do they need any particular tools to do that?
Yep, they're going to need Adobe Creative Cloud.
Okay. So you want to make that clear.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's a good note.
Yeah, Creative Cloud is, because I use it in my class, in my undergraduate class, we use Adobe Muse for creating portfolios. And it's really cheap for if you're in education, for students. So it's like $20 a month.
Right, right, exactly.
And then they get everything, so it's really a nice tool, but they've got to use it,
Right.
You've got to get it in that month usually. Well, they pay another $20, whatever. So, but as long as they're an undergrad, they're in a
right.
I know they often look for a .edu extension in their email, and there's other ways you can send transcripts. But that's just something I know that sometimes can get tricky. I mean, you might be able to use something else, but that's,
yeah.
not going to get.
Yeah, I've had a few students that, similarly, I'm assuming the course is going to go 4 weeks. That's the typical, like, online. Sometimes you can pull that off as long as students sign up at the right time to get that 30 days in there. I know something I did when I was teaching intro computer art online was I gave them access to some free resources comparable. I know there's stuff like GIMP out there. Inkscape is a vector drawing program. There might be some open source stuff that would be useful to them, but in terms of like the popularity and the features available and how comparable it is, it might not be as powerful a tool as having Creative Cloud would be.
There's one called Scribus, which is like InDesign, and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's really pretty good. For free, it's great.
Yeah.
It's not as pretty, it's not as beautiful, but it works great.
It's usually, the difference is usually in the interface, but if you get over that, you're fine. Well, there's not always the same amount of support material is sometimes the problem.
But I mean, if these students are art students, then they would have familiarity with these tools to begin with, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I was going to say that they'll be comfortable with it and they'll want to use it. And Steve chimed in, I think it was Steve, maybe it was James, that Adobe is the industry standard, so sometimes it's good for them be using something that they know is also something that employers, want to see them using.
And being that the prerequisite is the first level graphic design, they're already familiar with a lot of it.
Yeah, that may not be a big issue. The one thing, I don't know if you can scroll back a little where you were showing the Bloom's taxonomy stuff. One thing I often want to do with, and by the way, I don't know, just a thought is to create one module, go through it, set it up, make sure it works.
Right.
Then do the second one rather than do just two, because once we're done with one, either we may decide that's enough, or we may say, oh, this is a piece of cake, you got to do them anyway, just let's go through one more. I did want to mention that one way, and especially if you're thinking about learning outcomes, I always try to think of a verb for every one of those levels. So it's either, it's not so much, it's sort of understand, apply, evaluate, create. Some of it's in the headings there, but remembering isn't quite what you're after there. It's sort of more knowing or whatever. But knowing's right there. So you're, but think of those verbs, and usually, I guess these are already approved class. Well, this is would you say a 490 class? So you don't need to get approval, I guess. It's just
this is like a special topics.
Yeah. Well, usually special topics classes can only be offered once. So you may want to, and it's easy once you've created it to put in a curriculum action to get it approved as a regular class. And if you're going to do that, or even if you're thinking about it, and even as part of, this project, think about learning outcomes. What are they literally going to end up with? So, it's, and by the way, things like understanding are often not well received in terms of the community. It's sort of like, what do you mean understanding? What are they going to understand? So everything should have a product, even if it's like, through a quiz, you will know the different periods of time and be able to connect that to individual.
All right.
Are you trying to say something there, Eve, or someone? So you should always be thinking specifically, what are they going to walk away from each of these levels that they will be able to show they learned something, And, just saying they're going to understand the Industrial Revolution and graphic design is like, it's not clear. And they used to use those terms, but they don't anymore. I know they want to say, like show an example. Yeah, you've got it there in the description there. Show an example of a piece of graphic design from that era. Yeah. So it should be pretty straightforward to turn this into a curriculum action if, there's an interest in that. But it's also a good idea just as part of a thesis project to come up with learning outcomes for each level.
Okay. I was thinking like my next step should be to sit down and write the syllabus really carefully.
Sure.
And then do the one module from beginning to end.
Yep.
And the learning outcomes, I guess, is going to be in the syllabus. So. Right.
It's a key part of a syllabus. You want students to have a sense of why they're going to take the class and what they'll get out of it. So, you don't want it to be, I'm going to be applying Bloom's taxonomy. I mean, you're certainly going to say that in terms of your thesis, but in terms of what they're going to get out of it, you want to think each level what they will, become more aware of or better at. And especially if it's credit bearing, you need to have learning outcomes. So just always look at ways to apply the skills that they're going to learn.
I can show you just a couple of other things. Like I had to write a justification to try to even get it as a special topics class. And so some of these things I think will translate into my learning outcomes. The students will be assessed on their ability to apply, and I felt like this helped me a lot just to have to write this justification.
Sure.
So it's like I've been sort of like going through all the steps. I just haven't done it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got, yeah.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, you're really ahead of the game because you understand the taxonomy and how to actually apply, and moving, from teacher-centered to student-centered is a key thing that's going on here, because once they start creating something that's pretty much completely student-centered, and the middle three are all moving, or the middle four are moving from teacher-centered to student-centered design, or learning, student-centered learning. So they're kind of moving from one end to the other, and yeah, that's what higher level learning is student-centered. And teacher-centered is more behavioral, because you're really giving them a quiz, or just what's one thing I was curious about. I think you mentioned giving them quizzes. Did you?
Yeah, for one part of it, a short quiz on the reading assignment.
How are you going to give that in an online environment that's not
on Blackboard, in using Blackboard's quizzes?
Okay.
Yeah, there's a quiz module that you can implement for delivering exams and quizzes, and I think you can even time them too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is you really want to be a little bit careful about that. I mean, some people do have trouble with specific times because they're I don't know, everyone's a little different, but
yeah,
it is a problem because obviously they could share it in the worst case scenario.
Well, the truth is, like with the quizzes, I think they're going to be basically open book. I just want to make sure they interact with the reading. Okay. So I know you can actually let them take the quiz twice, and the Blackboard will take the highest mark.
Right.
And I'm all for that, because if they get one wrong and they go back to the textbook and reread it, that's fine with me. I don't think it's so much like testing their reading, but just making them interact with the reading and make sure they do look at the textbook and do read it. So I don't know. I wouldn't time it, because that makes me nervous, like even to think about having to take a test that's timed. I'd rather them take their time and take it twice, and if they get some questions wrong, go back and look it up again. I think that would be a good solution.
Yeah, I mean, the only issue is you don't particularly want them to take the quiz and then give all the answers to their friends. Now, there is a way, Ken may know more about this. I remember when I used to give quizzes, you could swap the answers, so they won't just say, oh, the answers are A, B, B, C, or,
You make everything random. Or
they
shuffles. It shuffles.
Yeah. They change, and even the questions may change in their order, or even change the questions. Maybe you have 12 questions, and you're only going to ask each student 8 or 6.
Right. Yeah, you have like a question bank, and yeah. I've actually been using that with my face-to-face classes. They have to watch Linda videos once a week, and they have to take a quiz after they watch the lynda.com video.
Okay. Yeah, it becomes worthwhile for them to just study rather than start playing games with what someone else did. If the questions change and the order changes.
That's a real concern, right?
Yeah, and it also helps when you're looking to get approvals. They're going to ask.
Yeah.
How do you know they're not just giving each other the answers?
Right.
I mean, I tend to agree with you that in the end, if they really want to subvert the process, let them. And they're going to have to do their own creations later on. So
right.
You can't get too paranoid about it.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was going to add, I don't know if you talked about this when I kind of like cut out and dropped out and had to come back into Zoom. It's more meant to be part of a way of facilitating like constructivist learning theory reflection. So it's more of a way, I use quizzes in my current job to sort of give them a way of getting feedback on their performance and helping facilitate that reflection in constructivism. So giving them some way of self-evaluating to help bridge any sort of gaps in that knowledge or that experience that I want to make sure that they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good point. And it's just sort of saying, I want to give you credit for work you've done. I mean, and you know, it's really heavily behavioral, you know, in the sense that they're going to get a grade and that's what's going to motivate them for that one anyway. And so, you know, that's fine. It's just you're starting on the left, usually in behavioral, and you're moving on the right to constructivism, which I think you've already mentioned. So you're sort of moving from one to the other, and in the middle are the cognitive skills, you know, analyzing and applying and evaluating. So, yeah, so when you're at the behavioral end, the best way to you know, feel you know, it's memorization. So it's sort of, do you get it, you know, but it's not strict memorization because as you said, it, you know, you can, it's open book. You have no way of getting them to close their book, you know, unless you're going to videotape them or something.
And it's the mark for the quiz is just a small percentage. The real mark is on their creative project.
Yeah, you actually want them to get all A's on that. It gets them feeling good about things, and they move on, and they feel like, you know, they're in the class, and they're, you know, they're understanding the basic concepts. So it's not like you're trying to catch them or something.
Right.
That's the furthest thing. Well, that sounds good. Anyone else have any thoughts?
I know you had said you weren't planning on doing any like synchronous stuff with them. One thing you might want to try it. I'm in a purely androdical kind of scenario right now. I have a lot of adult learners with New York State employees. And one of the things that I found to be pretty successful was just because of the geographical reach of a lot of the stuff that I do now, having something like office hours online for just an hour once a week. That's
a great suggestion. Yeah.
And recording it, people loved that. The students, broad age range even, they found that to be very helpful. Even if they couldn't attend at the time, being able to go back and see what was talked about in some way, using that to help augment their understanding.
So you videotape the office hour, like you do a screencast or?
Yeah, yep. We use a platform called WebEx. I think you can also do it with, well, you can do it with Zoom. You can also do it with Skype. And there's some other like sort of video conferencing softwares out there too that let you capture your session. And then we actually have a dedicated video portal that I'd upload it to, but it could go onto YouTube to a channel, could be posted, you know, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that'll help your retention rates too, especially at that level, because students just get nervous. They're off. There's something wrong. Or
and that's what I experienced too. Like even though you like sort of kick things off and give them everything they needed that one-to-one connection to be able to ask questions and just sort of confirm, you know, this is in fact the thing that they should be doing right now.
Yeah. All right. That's a great suggestion. I will include that.
You're seeing it in motion here, because it's really why I'm holding these sessions. Is I was getting overwhelmed. I don't know, what do you want? Then they're changing their ideas, and people were, you know, not getting feedback, and I felt terrible. And I figured, okay, let's just schedule times. I'm going to be there if no one else. And Dr. Ucell's been great to be here, and Dr. Schneider's been at some. So, you know, but I'm here. So at least you're, you know, we're doing this now, and that's sort of part of that, is this idea of getting real time. And I agree with Ken that sometimes the thing is just schedule it, you know, and maybe no one will show up the first time, you know, do it the next time. And if no one shows up, okay, so no one you know, they feel good. You know, make that any kind of a judgment, but at least you're available. So it is good if you can literally schedule. So some people start emailing you. You can say, how about if we meet during my office hours, you know, try to draw them in. So, you know, you get them at the session.
And I did a couple too, where I had like a set agenda to talk about, or it was just completely open. And the students really dictated what was talked about and what direction that session took.
Great, thank you. That's great.
Sure. Yeah, those are things that, and you can include that in your journal. Well, you're actually not going to need that for this, but you can mention it and sort of discuss these sorts of issues in terms of why you think it might be a useful thing to do. You really don't want to include it in this anyway, because then you got all sorts of IRB issues, but at least this way you're just going to describe it and note that it's going to be a part of the class environment, and just go with that. So that'll be fine. You don't need any approvals for an idea.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah, you'll be fine. Always look at ways. Yeah, and I'm glad to help out with this. It's just the sort of thing that I feel good about it. I like it when students go off and start applying ideas that they learned in class. There's, but yeah, those two areas, Bloom's taxonomy, but also the idea of behavioral learning, then cognitive learning, and then constructivist. And you can see that how it applies with your levels as well. So you should be in good shape.
All right.
Great. Okay, I see Dave's here. I'm glad. How you doing? And